Welcome to One Room at a Time. I'm your host, Atticus LeBlanc, founder and CEO of PadSplit, the country's largest co-living marketplace. I've spent more than 2 decades in affordable housing as a property owner, developer, and now an entrepreneur. This show brings together some of the brightest minds in housing to talk about how we can create real solutions to solve the housing crisis. And joining me today is Dennis Shea, Executive Vice President at the Bipartisan Policy Center and Chair of the J. Ronald Terwilliger Center for Housing Policy. Dennis has spent decades working at the intersection of policy, economics, and housing. Earlier in his career, he served as Assistant Secretary for Policy Development at HUD during the George W. Bush administration. He also served as Deputy U.S. Trade Representative and U.S. Ambassador to the World Trade Organization in Geneva, where he worked on global trade issues. Today, at the Bipartisan Policy Center, Dennis leads the Terwilliger Center for Housing Policy, which focuses on practical bipartisan solutions to improve housing affordability and expand housing supply across the country. Dennis, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Atticus, great to be with you. It's a beautiful day here in Washington, D.C. Gorgeous.
So I hear, yeah, I'm in Atlanta, but it's beautiful here as well. So no complaints. Well, Dennis, yeah, let's kick it off. You've obviously had quite an interesting career spanning a lot of different sectors and policy leaders and elected officials. So just curious to know your background and how you ultimately became focused on housing.
Well, thank you. I've had a bit of a circuitous route to where I am, and I'm glad you said spanning issues, not decades, because I am getting older. But yeah, I've had a couple of strains of work in my background. I've obviously have worked in housing policy in a number of different areas, but I also have this trade China background. So it's a little bit interesting. I think Carla Hills might have a similar, is the only one in Washington, D.C. who has a similar background, because she was the former Secretary of HUD under the Ford administration, which was also the USTR, U.S. Trade Representative, a little higher level than what I have been, but basically, housing and trade. So there are two of us, at least two of us in this universe of housing and trade people. But, I started working on the Hill, got an opportunity to work for Senator Bob Dole when he was the majority leader. That got my guy named Bob Lighthizer walked into my office. I started out as a corporate attorney. He walked into my office and said, "Would you like to work for Bob Dole?" Because he had previously been the staff director for the Senate Finance Committee when Bob Dole was the chair. And I said, "Absolutely, I want to do this. I don't want to be working on these 300-page corporate documents, that endless documents." So I said, "Absolutely." So it's just an amazing experience to be able to, particularly for someone who had a kind of a political bug to begin with, to have the opportunity to work for Bob Dole. And 30 years later, Bob Lighthizer called me up and said, "Do you want to be a U.S. ambassador to the World Trade Organization? And you have to move to Geneva." And I said, "Wow, that's really interesting. I'll call you. I'll call you tomorrow. I have to check with my wife first on that one. But I'll call you back tomorrow."
I figured that was in the cards, at least a wise move.
Right. So that's how I that's sort of one strain. I was on this U.S.-China Commission for 11 years, which was an advisory body to the U.S. Congress. But on the housing side, I was the executive director of a presidential commission on the U.S. Postal Service, believe it or not, in 2006. And it was an effort to, provide a blueprint for reforming the Postal Service. And some of the ideas were reflected subsequently in legislation. This was in 2003, actually. And after that, I told the Bush administration, "Okay, I did this job. We got this report out. It's been well received. I would like to stay in the administration." And they said, "Okay, you could be the Assistant Secretary for Policy Development and Research at HUD." Now, I have to admit, I didn't come with a lot of background on the housing issue when I came into that position. I think I had a skill set where I could learn things quickly and knew the how Washington worked, and
Sure.
I think it served me well. It's an office within HUD. I could consider it consisting of some of the smartest people in the entire building. A lot of PhD economists, sociologists, number crunchers, And I got in there when the position I took was vacant, and my predecessor had left. So I came in, and I thought, I need to connect these really smart people on the 8th floor of the building with the mission, with the 10th floor, which is where the
Okay.
secretary is, because they were totally disconnected. They're kind of a float. And so that's how saw my job at PD&R, was to connect this really smart group of people with the secretary and the mission of the department, which they had been disconnected from. So, but subsequently, I've worked for Ron Terwilliger, who founded the Terwilliger Center at BPC. On a number of projects, I worked at BPC on their housing commission report and project that was 14 or so years ago. So I've kept my oar in the water on housing. I care deeply about it, and particularly housing affordability. I know how important it is to live in a home that you can pay for sustainably,
Sure.
and how important it is to be living in a community that has access to amenities and opportunities. Because I grew up in New York City, grew up in Forest Hills, which is a really nice community. Probably I lived in one of the kind of less expensive homes with the Long Island Railroad running behind me. So it's kind of a modest home. Um, but it was in a neighborhood that had, families and kids and good schools and access to, the Manhattan and transportation. So it was a great community to live in. So I have a particular appreciation for location of housing as being important.
Love it. Well, yeah, everybody's got a housing story, and so
Yeah,
I really get engaged with all of them, and I think it says a lot about who you are and just how you develop based on what your housing history has been. So it's part of everyone's personality and ultimately their personal development moving forward. So we've mentioned the name Terwilliger several times. We've not had Ron on the
sure.
podcast, at least not yet. Uh,
Okay, you can get, well, we can make that happen if you want.
Yeah, we should. We should. But it's certainly a name that anyone in the housing space is very familiar with. Of course, you now lead the Ronald Terwilliger Center for Housing Policy at BPC. So first things first, like, who is Ron Terwilliger, and
Sure,
why is his name on everything?
sure.
For especially for the younger generation of housers who might not have any idea.
Sure, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it, Atticus. I mean, Ron Terwilliger is the former CEO of Trammell Crow Residential. So he is an apartment developer. He still is. He's no longer the CEO of Trammell Crow Residential, but he really built that company and created nearly 300,000 apartments during his tenure as the leader or
Sure.
CEO of the company. Ron decided, he made quite a bit of money. He decided he wanted to give back. He is, I think, one of the leading, if not the leading, housing philanthropist in the country. So he has been a longstanding member of the board and former chair of Habitat for Humanity International. He chaired for many years the Enterprise Community Partners, which is a affordable housing developer and syndicator and of low-income housing tax credits. He has a center also at the Urban Land Institute.
Mhm.
I got to meet Ron through Pam Patnode, who I know who's been on this podcast
Yep.
before, who introduced me to Ron to do a project for him, or some written, research
Mhm.
and at ULI. And I got to know Ron. Ron became part of the BPC Housing Commission, and I worked with him on that. But he's also, he's a graduate of the Naval Academy and is the largest single private donor to the U.S. Naval Academy. And so he really feels deeply. He and his brother um, both went to the Naval Academy. They grew up in Arlington, not far from here, in a very modest home. But as they said, it was a good neighborhood. It was a
Yep.
good neighborhood with lots of families and kids. And Ron was also an athlete. So he was at the U.S. Naval Academy when Roger Staubach was there. So
Yep.
like Roger Staubach, I think was a couple of years younger, but Staubach was the big man on campus on football, and Ron was the big man on campus with respect to basketball and
And
baseball.
baseball. Yeah.
And the field is named after him and his brother Bruce at the
Yeah.
Naval Academy
Speaking of
baseball
his
field.
name being everywhere, right? You just
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, he loves the Naval Academy. And the thing I think that's most important about Ron is he cares deeply. He loves people. He loves being around people. And that's one of his, I think, his most charming attributes is that he likes to engage with people and be with people. And
and so
so I think that's important to know.
Well, amazing. Well, yeah. Hopefully one day we'll get him on the pod. But so you brought him to BPC, is that right, for this housing center?
Well, he had been affiliated with BPC,
Hmm.
he had been on the Housing Commission, but that ended in 2013.
Okay.
And then I reached out to him with Jason Gourmet, who was the president of BPC at the time, and Pam, who was on the board, and Henry Cisneros, who's also on the board, former HUD
Sure. Former
secretary,
HUD
and I was there. I said, let's get the band back together.
Yeah.
And Ron was interested, and so he made a donation to us, created this center.
Amazing. Well, so I love Bipartisan Policy Center and all the great work that you all produce. And it's interesting. I don't know. You've obviously worked across a number of different industries and just segments of policy. But one of the things that I always found interesting about housing specifically is it does seem to cut across the aisle. And so it's a perfect fit for the Bipartisan Policy Center. And of course, you all put on your annual conference there as well. But yeah, tell me, like, how do you view the role as BPC in housing policy today?
Without being immodest, I think we were a stimulant to the current. I mean, obviously, the housing crisis, housing affordability was the biggest stimulant, but we encouraged bipartisanship, on the Hill around housing, because after Build Back Better fell apart, you may remember that, some of your listeners may remember that was the Biden administration's version of
Sure.
the One Big Beautiful Bill. Had a lot of money in there for housing. A lot of people in the housing policy advocacy community were dismayed by that. And we came in and said, look, we see the housing affordability challenge through three lenses: the need for more supply to meet demand, the need to preserve the existing affordable housing stock, and the need to help some families whose incomes don't meet their housing costs with demand side supports like vouchers. And we looked in these three lanes: supply, preservation, and demand. And we found bipartisan ideas in Congress. And we also had a few of our own, and we put them together into a package, and we called it the American Housing Act, and it was a plan. And then we started shopping that around the Hill 3.5 years ago. And we said, you can do something that's comprehensive and meaningful that's also bipartisan. So I think that triggered some thoughts among people on the Hill. So now you have two bills, one passed by the Senate and one passed by the House that are, we can get into that, what the status of that is later. But so there is action, there's real, significant movement on it. Our whole mission at the Terwilliger Center is to promote bipartisan policies that improve housing affordability. And I like to say we were talking about affordability before it became politically fashionable. So we were talking about it when we first started. That was at the heart of the mission of the center.
Love it. Well, I've never claimed to be fashionable, and I don't think anyone would ever accuse me of such a thing. But yeah, let's just dive right into the policy side. I mean, when I think of affordability, Dennis, I think really two things. Everybody talks about housing supply, right? And that the reason we have this affordability issue is because too much demand, not enough supply. I also, and I don't know, I haven't heard many other people talk about this, but this access question, overcoming barriers to entry. But let's just stick to the supply side for now. A lot of heated debate right now, or actually maybe not enough heated debate, depending on who you ask, around the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, which is the bill that the Senate passed that you alluded to, and lots of people getting wrapped around the axle around this provision that ultimately, in their words, kind of kills the build to rent industry by saying that new home construction that is built to rent has to be sold in 7 years, and then those built to rent providers say, well, that basically means that we're never going to be able to get capital to invest in this if they know that they're forced to sell in 7 years. I don't know what the other hangups might be, but that certainly seems to be the main one that I've heard. And curious to know, you've been at least moderately vocal or measured and bipartisan in your approach on LinkedIn compared to a lot of other housers that I've seen out there. But yeah, would love to just get your take on the bill, the controversy, what it does, what it doesn't do, and why you either believe it should pass in its current form, or everybody should get together, or what you think should happen from here.
Well, thanks for that, Atticus. I mean, we supported the House bill called the Housing for the 21st Century Act. So we endorsed that, and we're happy to see that pass. And then we supported the Senate bill, endorsed the Senate bill, because both bills contain a lot of similar, provisions, and many of the provisions, like probably 24, were provisions that we had endorsed at BPC and our C4 affiliate, the BPC Action. There are many provisions in the bill. I like to describe the bill in baseball terms. It doesn't really have a Shohei Ohtani or Aaron Judge provision, but has a lot of 260 hitters up and down the line. And, so collectively, it's a really good team,
Okay.
And so there was a lot in the bills, both bills that we like. The provision you're talking about on build to rent and the 7-year divestiture, there was always in the Senate bill, a provision that restricted institutional investment in single family homes, but there was an exception to single family rental. And then at the very last minute in the Senate, they added a provision to say that investors in the single family rental would have to sell their single family rental home within 7 years. And so that's the source of the controversy. It passed the Senate 89-10. President Trump endorsed the bill. He issued a statement of administration policy, which, back in the day, when I worked for Bob Dole, that was routine issue statements of administration policy. But I think that practice had gone into disuse. So this was like an official endorsement. So that's pretty bipartisan. We've been, and,
No
part
question.
of our ethos is that members of Congress need to be working together. So right now, you have not a partisan problem, you have a bicameral problem. So there are members on the House side who, the House bill passed, 390-9. So that was pretty bipartisan,
You're
right?
not going to find much more bipartisan. I mean, has there been anything in the last 8 years or so that's been that
maybe
bipartisan?
post office namings or something like that, but renamings. Both bills are incredibly bipartisan. But this rent to home, or this
Build to rent.
build to rent issue is a big source of tension between the two chambers. There are also a couple of other issues. There's this provision in the Senate bill that would prohibit the Federal Reserve from issuing a digital currency, but the prohibition sunsets in December 2030, I believe. And that some House conservatives say, we don't want that at all. It should never sunset. It should be a permanent ban. And then Chairman Hill in the House bill also included a community banking title that deregulated community banks. And his point is that through deregulating, you're going to encourage community banks to get more involved in mortgage lending, be more able to lend. So those are some of the differences. There's a lot of overlap between the two bills, but those are the differences. And there are either three ways this is going to work out. I mean, either they have a conference, they work it together, have a conference, official conference, or they have a more informal negotiation between the four corners, between the chair and ranking members of the Senate Banking Committee and the House Financial Services Committee, sort of work it out. Maybe President Trump will come out and say he endorsed the Senate bill and just sort of put pressure on the House to pass the Senate bill. That could be a possibility. And another possibility is they just don't do anything, and the bills just sort of die on the vine in both the Senate and House. So we want a bill. We want a bipartisan, comprehensive, meaningful bill. We understand that the process, there's always a give and take in the process. You're not going to get 100% of what you want if you're going to get to be bipartisan. So that's where things stand. It's kind of both bills have passed their respective houses, and we're waiting to see what happens next.
Yeah, no, it has certainly been interesting to watch. And I'll just, sticking to baseball terms, Dennis, if you need Aaron Judge to step to the plate and you want to introduce a co-living provision into the bill, just throw that in the mix. I'm sure that will just it'll sail through, get knocked out of the park.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because I've been thinking about, your work. I mean, the thing that to me is most impressive about what you have done, I mean, you've housed about more than 70,000 people.
Yeah.
But affordably. But what you've done is, do it in a way without taxpayer subsidies and without public subsidies. And that's kind of amazing. And, we at BPC focus on fiscal. We have a big fiscal unit that is sounding the alarm about our $39 trillion national debt. And there's just going to have to be some reckoning at some point. But the fact that you have achieved what you have achieved, giving people opportunity without public subsidy, is really impressive. So I think this is no, it's the truth. And so I think that's a key thing that you guys have going for you. What your model has going for you. The other thing, if I may, I mean, I just came back from a U.S. Aging conference last week, and I worked on a report at BPC called "Healthy Aging Begins at Home," which is 10 years old, that talked about the aging of the population.
Sure.
And how most seniors want to age in their communities and in their own homes, the same communities and in their home, but they're not equipped. Their homes are not equipped for that. So, I mean, I think co-living could be, I've heard anecdotal stories of college students looking for an affordable place to live, living with a senior. I've heard it anecdotally, but it seems to me that is that could be scaled a little bit more. That could be a big opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen it. I mean, it's so funny that you bring this up now, Dennis. I literally just got an email from Samuel Hooper at Institute for Justice about a conference in Raleigh sponsored by AARP, where they want to do a panel on shared housing. And just yesterday, I published to our team a study that I have been working on personally, where for the last 3 years, I've been A/B testing a duplex, where part is a 55+ community and part is just strictly market rate, and comparing the performance of those two identical units. And aside from, I think most people think about the multi-generational aspect of pairing young people or graduate students with seniors. But in our case, it was just the seniors creating their own community. Although I'm not sure 55+ necessarily counts as senior yet. I don't know when exactly.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That is whoever came up with that standard. I mean, I don't know.
I thought you might have an objection to that. As soon as you mentioned the Ford administration, Dennis, I think I figured I was in
I was
deep
around during
water
the
there.
Ford administration, Atticus.
But in any case, yeah. So for the last 3 years, we've been running the side by side test, and uh, maybe not surprisingly to you or a lot of other folks, the returns and tenure retention, overall operating costs were better in the 55 plus than they were in market rate. And so uh, you see the boomers now that are aging, and we have this quote unquote silver tsunami that you hear people talk about. And it's a huge problem, particularly as that generation ages and goes on fixed income.
Right.
Housing costs continue to rise and fixed income remains fixed. So we've seen, I think, a push from both sides, both the growth in that overall population, even though it's only about 15% of our users right now. But our average age is 44 for folks that are renting rooms. And so
Really.
you're not that far away from that number growing. And then it looks like from an operational standpoint, there's a lot of reason to do it as well. So it's something I'm really interested to push on, and I've been encouraging our team to dive a lot deeper into that space. But yeah, it's something that we all have to confront. And I mean, I have parents who are aging, and we're confronting a lot of these same issues. And I'm sure a lot of America and a lot of our listeners are familiar with this as well and looking for
I mean,
solutions.
my mother lived in the same house. It was a 3-story townhome in New York, with 1 bathroom, but same house I grew up in. She died at 95, and she basically lived in the house till the end. It was totally unsuited for her,
Yeah.
but she just wanted to stay, and we sort of made efforts to work around to make it a little bit more accommodative of her needs.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, very, very similar situation. My grandmother died at 95, I think she was, and was in an old Victorian, the same house where she raised 9 kids. So,
Wow.
and not at all suited. I mean, she ended up living basically in the dining room for the last couple of years of her life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of space there. And I think both of these examples are indicative of how many bedrooms there were, how much space there was in the 3-story home in New York, or certainly in this same house, the Victorian Baltimore, where she raised 9 kids. And I think about the quote unquote supply issue, which is a big part of the debate in the bill currently out of the Senate, is, well, we're gonna eliminate 50,000 new homes from the supply, and anything that we can do to increase supply is ultimately going to be better for affordability. But from my perspective, one, I agree with that, but also the 2 examples we just talked about illustrate it's not that we really have a quote unquote supply shortage. It's that we have an unwillingness to share. And similar ethos, whether you're talking about bridging the aisle in bipartisan issues, or just building trust generally within society, so that people will consider the use of that space and not be totally terrified that all hell is going to break loose if we rent out those empty bedrooms, or even just 1 out of every 100, which would result in, by my count, about 7 million units. It's a tough question to answer, and certainly a pressing problem.
Absolutely.
Where do you go from here, Dennis? I mean, you've been working on a bipartisan housing bill, comprehensive reform, for, what'd you say, 3.5 years?
About 3.5 years. Yep.
And so now it's on the floor. It's been passed.
It's been on the floor twice in the Senate and once in the House, and passed both houses. So we're just hoping it gets over the legislative finish line.
Yeah. So how do you get something? Of course, aside from bringing co-living into the bill, which we know that would totally do it.
That's the sweetener. That's the sweetener.
That's right. But yeah, I mean, like, how does Bipartisan Policy Center engage here to at least get everybody around the table to talk things through, or do you?
My colleague over on the C4 side, BPC Action, is in constant contact with, the key staff and members in both houses. So I mean, we are continuing to. I mean, we'll see how this plays out. We'll
Mhm.
give this a bit more time, but I think people, the American people, want Congress to act on housing affordability. I think there's a reason why both bills passed so overwhelmingly is because members of Congress were responding to their constituents, and this is no longer kind of a coastal issue or big city issue. High housing costs are affecting communities of all kinds across the country. And President Trump, he cared. I mean, I think there are people in his administration who are zeroed in on this. I mean, the president also issued two executive orders. He's issued one. His priority was the institutional investor. He issued
Yep.
an order prohibiting institutional investment in this single family homes, or restricting it at least.
Yep.
And But he issued two other executive orders 10 days ago that one would promote deregulation, knocking down barriers to affordable housing, and directing various federal agencies, including HUD, to look at ways to knock down barriers and reduce costs. And he also issued an executive order designed to promote access to mortgage credit, affordable mortgage credit. So I think the White House I think the White House feels they need to be responsive as well. So I think housing, I believe housing is having its moment in Congress. I mean, it started really in the One Big Beautiful Bill, the other reconciliation package, with the expansion of the low-income housing tax credit, which increased federal support for it, which has, while the bill itself, One Big Beautiful Bill, was a partisan measure, the LIHTC aspect of it was very bipartisan. So that was a recognition. That was the first signal that Congress was responding, and then I see these two bills as the second signal. So we're going to continue, shining the spotlight on this issue. We're also engaged with governors. We're also engaged with mayors. At our upcoming summit in June, we hope to have mayors and governors in attendance, because whatever happens with these bills, and hopefully they'll pass, something will pass. It's not going to solve the housing affordability challenge. It's just one piece, and what needs to get done are multiple actions, including at the state level, at the local level, also involving the private sector and philanthropy. So really, there's no magic solution. Just you need multiple solutions, dozens of solutions working in tandem.
No question. Firmly agree with you there.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting as I've looked at this bill, and I was certainly frustrated by the provision that you had spoken about around build to rent. Not because it would impact us negatively. It might even impact us positively as a company, but as a general rule, I just I would like to see more housing supply, or more funding coming into the housing space generally. But at the same time, I've got to check myself. And as many times as I've told our staff, like, you can't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And wondering if that's true here as well. And to your point, like, if you've got 89-10 in the Senate, there's probably something to be said for let's take some incremental steps and move forward. I'm assuming is that where you guys are today?
Yeah, I mean, we support. I mean, we think there should be more private investment in housing, not less. Both bills got overwhelming endorsement, and the legislative process is often messy, and the result may not be exactly what you want. But if there's more in there that's good than bad, then you probably should take the win.
Well, and it's revenue neutral, right? I mean, at least from from everything I've read, that it's the fact that you have a revenue neutral bill in and of itself is probably a significant win.
Yeah. So we'll see where it ends up. We'll see where it goes.
Well, good. Well, this has been great. I want to wrap up, Dennis. If you have some time for some quick rapid fire Q&A.
Sure.
You ready?
Sure.
What's a daily habit for you that you just can't miss?
I walk 5 miles a day.
Really?
Yeah. which is below what I used to walk, but I'm up to doing 5 miles a day. I need to do that. And I don't do it with earphones or I just walk.
Just take it all
So
in.
I love walking and I
Excellent.
look at what's around me.
What do you-
And
Well, this time of year, it's a great practice. I imagine the
right.
cherry blossoms are in bloom in DC, right?
It's gorgeous now. In the wintertime, it can be a little more difficult. So,
All good.
but particularly this winter because we had some cold and some snow.
Indeed. Yeah, I was there for some of that. What are you currently reading that's inspirational for you?
I just reread Boys in the Boat. Are you familiar with that book?
I am. Yeah.
So it's just an amazing story of I think this team, the University of Washington team,
Yep.
that represented the United States at the 1936 Olympics in Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about, I mean, the backgrounds of these guys. I mean, if we think we have it bad now, this is in the midst of the Depression. Each one of the guys in the boat really came from a difficult background, including sort of the protagonist of the book, whose father basically said at age 14 or 15, you have to leave the house. We can't take care of you anymore. And they won by like less than a second. They beat Italy in this, and they're all, half the team was sick. A couple of the key members of the boat were sick, and they won. So it's really inspirational. And that just, they have a brotherhood. I mean, those guys, I think they probably all have passed or maybe, but they, I mean, that's something no one can take away from you.
Love it.
After that happens.
That's a great one. And also a movie. So it might have to.
Yeah, the movie's not as good as the book. The movie's nowhere near as good as the book.
Never is. What's one housing policy idea you wish more people understood?
I think it's important for people to understand that rental housing and home ownership are part of the same continuum. They're not siloed. They're really part of the same
journey,
same housing journey. And so if you can, make rents more affordable, that can enable people to save the down payment and become a homeowner someday. So to say that you're investing in rental housing that's against home ownership, that's not true. I mean, it's all part of the same system.
Yeah. We talk about the continuum all the time.
Right.
If you could wave a magic wand and fix one thing, well, just one about the U.S. housing system tomorrow, what would it be?
Well, I talked to my friends at the National Association of Home Builders, and they say that, the 25% of the cost of a single family home is regulatory compliance costs, and 40% of the cost of a multifamily development is regulatory compliance costs. So that's just way too much. But then you ask them, what are the 2 or 3 biggest ones? And they say, well, this is federal, state, local, and there are hundreds of them. So if we get AI to kind of look at this and say, let's streamline, let's rationalize maybe up and down the system and kind of really reduce these costs, because it's stupid. We're getting in the way. We're getting our own way.
Totally agree.
To build.
Totally agree. Well, Dennis, thank you. This has been a great conversation. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the work you're doing, and really bringing bipartisan thinking and practical solutions to one of the most pressing challenges facing our country today. For our listeners, you can learn more about Dennis and the Terwilliger Center at bipartisanpolicy.org. We will include links in the show notes. Be sure to subscribe to One Room at a Time wherever you listen or watch, and tell us who we should talk to next. You can find us at padsplit.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. Thanks for tuning in to One Room at a Time.